Well, welcome again. We're thrilled that you're watching Flame of Truth. Everywhere I turn, I'm talking to people who are beginning to find us with Flame of Truth. I'm Pastor Dan. People call me all over the world Pastor Dan Smith. Working with the Southeastern California Conference Office now and trying to do new ways of doing evangelism here and all over the world. But I'm part of LLBN and thrilled to be doing a series on the book of Revelation. I hope that you saw the first two. If not, find a way to get it off the web or something. And now we're ready to go into the next few chapters of the book of Revelation. We're going to do every chapter right straight through. We did the first one called The Star of the Fourth Quarter, where we looked at the role of Jesus. It's a revelation of Jesus Christ. It's not, first of all, about beasts and animals and dragons and numbers and charts. It's about Jesus. And we can show that theme as we go through the series. And then we did the seven churches. Wish we had time to do one on every church, but I wasn't sure you'd watch for that many sermons on one book. Maybe we should have, I don't know. But we tried to cover the highlights of the seven churches. And now today, Revelation 4 and 5. So get a Bible and let's follow along. I don't know if it's been 20 or 25 years ago now in the Adventist world that I'm a part of, all of a sudden a new phenomenon popped up. There were two of them called celebration churches. One was here, not too far actually, from where LLBN studios are. A good friend of mine is the pastor of that church, and it's a thriving, flourishing, godly church. Another one's in Portland, Oregon, where I started in the ministry a long time ago. And the one who started that was an old friend of mine, and very good friends. And all of a sudden, the whole country in our tradition were talking about the celebration churches. What did they do? Well, they had overhead projectors, putting the transparencies and putting praise songs up on the screen. Rather than opening up hymnals and singing from the 600 or 700 hymns there, they were putting in praise songs and songs that weren't traditional hymns. Oh, this was controversial, and you were looking up and looking at these words up on the screen. And then maybe a little clapping after songs or testimonies or baptisms. And what else did they do? They had a garden of prayer. When they would have the prayer service, they would invite people to come forward, and there may be 50 or 100 or 200 people kneeling, asking God to serve them in a special way, minister to them when they had the prayer service. They boomed. All of a sudden, these churches were electric and people were coming. They had greeters out on the front of the church. They were going to build new buildings, and they were the hot new item. At the same time, there became a reaction, and there were people making videos and doing all kinds of things, criticizing the celebration churches. And one of the criticisms was that, what do we have to celebrate anyway? It's like the Israelites being out there wandering in the wilderness for 40 years. How do you celebrate? We have sinned, and now we're out here in the wilderness, and all of our people are dying because we're in the wilderness. We're going to celebrate that. How can we celebrate? We're still here. We should be grieving over the sins in the church and the fact that the gospel has not gone all over the world and over the apostasy in the church. Someone told me that someone made over $1 million on those videos. I don't know if that's true or not. I was called at one time to maybe go be a pastor of one of those celebration churches. I was scared to death that would tie my name to that for the rest of my career. 20 years ago, it seemed silly. We've gone beyond all of those things. Now we all have words up on the songs with PowerPoint. And many churches will have some form of a band of some kind doing the music. And praise teams up in front. And garden of prayers happens all the time in the most traditional of churches. Do we have something to celebrate or not? Did they have a point? Should we be careful? Anyway, that's just an introduction to Revelation 4 and 5. Some people would say that even though we've already come through 3 chapters, Revelation 4 and 5 is really the heart of the book and maybe establishing the theme for the rest of the book. It is sometimes called the throne room vision of Revelation, as John the Revelator looks into heaven and sees someone on the throne, the God on the throne. Anyway, I don't have time to read every single verse, but I hope that we'll catch the heart and flow of these 2 chapters and how it sets up the rest of the book. Many would say that the heart and the drumbeat of the book of Revelation is a theme of worship and celebrating God. and worshiping God. Anyway, let's see what you think as we get into this. I'm going to skip past chapter 4, which has the picture of the throne room of God, and go to chapter 5. As we jump into this passage, then I saw in the right hand of him who sat on the throne a scroll with writing on both sides and sealed with 7 seals. And I saw a mighty angel proclaiming in a loud voice, "Who is worthy to break the seals and open the scroll?" But no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth could open the scroll or even look inside it. I wept, meaning John, I wept and wept because no one was found who was worthy to open the scroll or look inside. Then one of the elders said to me, "Do not weep. See, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has triumphed. He is able to open the scroll and its 7 seals." Then I saw a lamb looking as if it had been slain, standing in the center of the throne, encircled by the 4 living creatures and the elders, and so on. So you get the story. John is weeping because there is no one who is worthy to open the scroll and tell us what is inside that scroll, break the seals. All of a sudden he points to someone who is the Lion and the Lamb. And if I ask any group around the world to say, who is this Lion and the Lamb? Everyone says it's Jesus. We have these composite symbols, but the symbols can move in different directions. Sometimes Satan is the lion roving around the world, seeking whom he may devour. But here we have Christ as the lion. C.S. Lewis, in all of the Chronicles of Narnia, has Christ as Aslan, the lion, the lamb, is also a lion. And he says, he's not tame, be careful of that. There's the lion quality of this Christ. But then there's also the Lamb who dies on a cross. Went to a seminar last year, and now there's a book out by a man named George Knight. Has been a professor of history for a long time, now retired and writing all the time. And he talks in this book and in the lectures that I went to over in Ontario about this composite symbol of the lion and the lamb. And maybe he uses it as a metaphor for the church. And as the pendulum swings, sometime for a while in our particular tradition, we emphasize the lion quality of God. And we had an emphasis on the prophetic nature of God. And last day events and eschatology we talk about. And signs of Christ coming, and a little more sensationalistic, and all the great prophecies of Daniel and Revelation and 2 Thessalonians 2 and Antichrist and the beast, and trying to show the world where we stand in the stream of time. Prophetic message. And many, many people came into the church. My grandfather and his brother, the Venden brothers, preached all over the country and later around the world. And I grew up going to sermons about Daniel and the beasts and charts, and it's exciting. We would sit there with our notebooks and write down all the interpretations and all the texts. I still have those. Exciting. That was the lion form, the lion aspect of Revelation. But then there's been a reaction, and we've swung away over to the Lamb. And now we've been focusing on Christ and grace and the incredible gospel that comes from Jesus Christ on the cross and the everlasting gospel of grace. Are we glad for a return to grace? Yes, which is from all through the Bible, and especially here in the book of Revelation, in a book that people maybe don't think of as grace, but we talked last week about how there is grace, and the last word is grace. Has the pendulum gone too far? This man was saying, George Knight was saying, do we need to recover some of the lion quality? We need to balance between the lambishness of the gospel and the lion. Christ is this composite being. Well, we'll let you think that through as we go through the rest of the book. But the bottom line is that John doesn't have to weep anymore because someone has been found who was worthy, who was the lion and the lamb, and we all agree that that is Jesus Christ. Well, what does that mean about the scroll? If this scroll can only be opened by someone who is worthy of the lion and the lamb, if Christ is the only one, then what is the one thing that only Christ could do? Why did Jesus Christ come? And so I have my contribution to this discussion. Everyone can put their own 2 cents in because Revelation is a challenging book. And I certainly don't know more than others, but I'll just tell you what I thought of. And when I thought of this, When John 1, verse 18 says, "No one has ever seen God, but God, the one and only, who's at the Father's side, has made him known." No one else. The only one who could do and told us what the Father was like and make the Father known would be the one who was one with the Father. And so I think John 1:18 is the clue to what is in that scroll. If Christ is the only one who can open it, and John 1:18 says Christ is the only one who can make the Father known, then could it be that the scroll is the questions about God that Jesus Christ came down to reveal? John 17, Jesus says, "I have brought you glory. I have done what I was commissioned to do. I've came and I brought you glory." Glory has to do with character. As we bring glory to Christ, the character of God is His glory. Glory is not just sort of a yellow radiance and brilliant glow. It is the glory of the character of God. And Jesus Christ came down because God's character had been defamed and destroyed and marred for thousands of years. The Bible says Satan is the father of lies, and he has blinded, 2 Corinthians 4, has blinded the minds of the men to the truth and the light of the gospel of truth about God. And that Jesus had to come and give us the light of the knowledge of God in the face of Christ. It's only Christ. Hebrews 1. In times past, God has spoken to us through the prophets. But now in these last days, He has spoken to us through His Son. He is the only one who can tell us the truth about God. So I want to say to you that I believe the scroll is a story of the questions about God. From the very beginning, when Lucifer began to go around and have the whispering campaign about what God was like, we have the questions about God. Is God like this? Is God like this? Is God the kind of God who burns you and will keep you alive for the rest of eternity so He can torture you and burn you some more in order for His justice to be satisfied? Is God the kind of God who has to kill His own Son in order to satisfy His own justice? Is God the kind of God who really doesn't want to heal you, doesn't want to answer your prayers, doesn't want to do anything until you pray thousands of prayers, pray through the saints, pray through Mary, pray through Jesus, pray through your pastor, pray through somebody who is more likely to have his prayers heard than you are able to have your prayers heard? And if we can just pound on the door of heaven and be warriors for God, prayer warriors, we can finally make God knuckle under to our requests, and He will give in to us. I'm sorry if I make that too pejorative, but we have to be careful. How many times have people said things like this? I was in a room in a class one morning, Saturday morning, what we call a Sabbath school class. Someone was telling a story, 3 years old, grew up in Australia. Some terrible disease came to him, almost died, and then he lived. Miracle. And I asked him, why do you think God saved you? Must have had a purpose to live. Had a purpose. Then does that mean that all the babies who die have no purpose or not such a good purpose? A more minor purpose? I asked the other day, what about the plane that landed on the Potomac the other day in Washington, D.C.? 9/11, 2001, we have planes crash into the buildings and 3,000 people are killed. 8 years later, another plane, disaster, runs into a flock of birds. The pilot is so skilled, lands on the river, no one is killed. They had all of them on Larry King the other night. And here are all the survivors. Thank you for the pilot. Was God involved? Did some of those people thank God? I'm sure they did. Then why didn't God save the people at 9/11? These are questions about God that have been asked for thousands of years. And could it be that the scroll is the story of these questions and of the answers that come through Christ? Anyway, that's what I believe. And now we have in Revelation 4 and 5 a series of songs and choirs that begin to sing. And I just want to go through them quickly, and we'll comment a little bit about each one. But the power is in the overall, not in trying to go through every phrase. So we'll just have some fun with this. Revelation chapter 4 and Revelation chapter 5. We have this long description in chapter 4, description of the room in heaven, the throne in heaven, someone sitting on it. And then we have the story of these four living creatures. Revelation 4, starting with verse 6. In the center around the throne were four living creatures, and they were covered with eyes in front and in back. The first living creature was like a lion, second like an ox, third had a face like a man, the fourth like a flying eagle. They tried to study and compare these to Daniel and to Ezekiel. Each of the four living creatures had 6 wings and was covered with eyes all around, even under his wings. Day and night they never stop saying, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come. Well, who are the four living creatures? Nobody knows for sure. I'll just tell you what I believe. I'm going to believe that they are from the inner circle of heaven. That group of angels, the covering cherubs, like Lucifer came from, and we talk about Gabriel. It says they have covered with eyes. I would take that to mean they have seen all that has ever happened. And from the very beginning, when Lucifer became Satan, began to ask these questions, that maybe he should be equal or higher than God. He should be the one to make the rules. He would make more enlightened rules that would be less intrusive and invasive and coercive on everyone else. And these four living creatures, they've seen everything. They've heard everything. They've seen God in all the years since they were created. They don't have to wonder. They don't need any more time. They vote quickly. They say, we're with God. We're with God. And they begin to sing, Holy, holy, holy. The one who was worthy, the one who is and was and is to come. They lock it in. There doesn't need any more evidence than needed for them. They have no more questions they have to be answered. They are settled. They're on God's side, and they begin to sing. Well, we have a second group, starting with verse 9. Whenever the living creatures give glory, honor, and thanks to Him who sits on the throne and who lives forever and ever, the 24 elders fall down before Him who sits on the throne and worship Him who lives forever and ever. They lay their crowns before the King and say, You are worthy, our Lord and God, to receive glory and honor and power. For You created all things, and by Your will they were created and have their being. Well, now we have 24. From 4 to 24. Lots of discussion of who these 24 are. I certainly don't have all the answers. People have talked about, the 12 tribes of Israel, the children, sons of Israel, and the 12 apostles of the New Testament, Old and New Testaments, various things. I have wondered, could they be representatives from the unfallen worlds? We will have everyone else later in the passage. Could it be that these are beings that C.S. Lewis and other writers have talked about, that C.S. Lewis has it in Out of the Silent Planet and Paralandra? Maybe God created other worlds and they had sort of tests like we had in the Garden of Eden. But they passed the test. Anyway, people have wondered about it. And maybe they're representatives. Job 1 seemed to indicate that they're representatives of the world and heavenly councils. Anyway, you have to decide what you think. I've had some fun with that. Could they be that group when they use the phrase they? Anyway, doesn't really matter. 24. They begin to sing now, not holy, holy, but You are worthy, because God is the creator. They have been watching, and now when they see God just speak and the universe is created, they begin to say, oh, God is right. And they begin to worship God. I hope that you have made that decision. That doesn't mean that you can't have some questions about exactly some of the details. We will study throughout eternity maybe. And we continue to have our scientists and our theologians studying and going out into the fossil record and to wrestle with all the evidence. Fine. But no one can really argue seriously that this is an incredible thing, that God who has hurled constellations and galaxies into space. And you just bow down and say, God, You are worthy. And they begin to sing. Then we go down to chapter 5. And starting with verse 7, He came and took the scroll from the right hand of Him who sat on the throne. When He had taken it, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb. How many now? 28. 4 and the 24. 28 are now singing. Each one had a harp, and they were holding golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of the saints. And they sang a new song. You are worthy to take the scroll and to open its seals, because You were slain. With Your blood You purchased men for God, from every tribe and language and people and nation. You have made them to be a kingdom and priests to serve our God, and they will reign on the earth. It can take a long time with this, but now we've come from before maybe creation of the world, the angels in heaven, down to creation, and now the cross, a new song. Now the choir is getting a little bigger, and they worship God, not because of creation, but because of the cross. The incredible act of a God. Only Christianity has this. No other religion, with all of their wisdom and truth, and believers, Only Christianity has this story of a God himself coming down and being on a cross and saying, I will finally take some responsibility for this. All the way through the Bible, we have this theme of God who comes, God who comes. He comes down and creates the world. He comes down to be with Adam and Eve. He comes down when he sees the suffering of people and he intervenes. And he comes and he's born of a baby. And he lives a life here, joins himself to us, and he dies on a cross. And when people see it, they begin to sing. The cross answers certain questions about what God is like. If you have questions about what God is like and you say, how could God do this? How can God allow this? How could God not answer my prayers? I have people that say they pray for God every day for years and it doesn't happen. I saw someone wrote a note last night that said, why isn't God answering my prayers? And people doubt the goodness of God. How can God let my husband die? How could? And the ultimate answer is the cross. It just says, don't doubt me. If I'm going to give you my own son, when God the Father and Christ have been together for thousands, millions, eons of years, they've been together forever. Whenever there was one, there was the other, in oneness of the Trinity. And now that oneness is ripped apart. One comes down and dies. And together on the cross, they go through the terrible separation. And now we see some things. We see the truth about God. We see what happens with sin. The truth about the cross is that sin will kill you. It's not God who kills Christ. It's not God who kills us. It is sin that will kill you. Be careful. And so the cross begins to enter some truths about God. And lots of people begin to worship. Then we go down farther, verse 11. Then I looked and heard the voice of many angels, numbering thousands upon thousands. 10,000 times 10,000, they encircled the throne and the living creatures. And the elders, in a loud voice they sang, read it with me. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain, to receive power and wealth and wisdom and strength, and honor and glory and praise. Now the angels, do you see how it's a square, an expanding square? Started with 4, 1 on a side. And then 24, 6 on a side. And then 28, 7 on a side. And now angels, thousands times thousands, 10,000 times 10,000. This expanding completeness of the kingdom of God as it gets larger and larger. And now they're singing in worship to God. And here's the trick question. Is there some understanding that would explain why Jesus could die for perfect angels who have never sinned? Jesus had not just died to sort of pay for sins and to balance out the heavenly books. There are questions that had to be answered, and evidently, even though the angels stayed in heaven, they are part of the, quotes, 2/3 of the angels from Revelation 12 that did not go with Satan and be cast down to this earth. They chose to stay, but they still not fully convinced. Excuse me, but when Jesus came and was born and then died, they said, okay, that's it. And they, along with the 4 living creatures in heaven, began to sing, you are worthy, you are worthy. And they locked it in. You can read Colossians 1, 18 and 19 and 20, where it says, all things on earth and in heaven were reconciled to God. And could it be that now all these questions are answered? And now we come to the 5th choir. Verse 13, then I heard every creature in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and on the sea and all that is in them singing to him who sits on the throne and to the Lamb to be praise and honor and glory and power forever and ever. The 4 living creatures said amen, and the elders fell down and worshiped. So here we have the 5th expanding circle of the choir. Started with 4 to 24 to 28 to the angels, and now every creature that has ever lived is now worshiping God. Some people would disagree whether the wicked are included. I'll let you decide that. But could it be that even the wicked eventually are going to bow down and acknowledge? You think what that day will mean to God after the lies that have been told about him from the first day that first lie was told. The heartbreak in God to have people that he loved and died for and created reject him, to use his name in vain, and to tell terrible lies, and to start whole churches and religions with distortions about what he was like. And now, finally, after all those thousands of years of agonizing, every being that has ever lived bows down and worships God. Some people say, does God really care about this? Why would he care? The whole story of the Bible is that God cares. He doesn't just work a miracle and just blast all the wicked out. He wants people to acknowledge that he was righteous. Daniel 9:14, the Lord is righteous in all that he does. Philippians 2:9-11, there will be a day when every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ was Lord. Revelation 15 verse 3, Revelation 19 has these verses over and over again, these great summations that God is righteous. It's why Jesus came, is to tell the truth about God. I have brought you glory. You think God cares? None of us like it when we are misunderstood and someone believes something that's wrong about us. We want to defend ourselves. Well, you think about what this day is going to be someday. I had a funeral one time with some friends of mine, Dwight Nelson at Andrews University. The organ began to play, Guide Me, O Thou Great Jehovah. Played one verse, just normal. And then the second verse, more stops. Third verse, 7,000 pipes begin to play. By the fourth verse, that whole stone church was rocking with sound. I went to school there and just remember the music. Warren Becker playing the organ. That's what it's going to be like someday. What we call the great controversy about God. It started with 4 living creatures saying, we're on God's side. We're with him. And they begin to sing, holy, holy, holy. Then the 24, then the 28, you are worthy, O God, because you were slain. And then the angels, and then every creature is going to sing. One of these days, the whole universe is going to rock, singing the truth about God. Don't miss it. How can any of us miss that moment when the whole universe will gather around the throne of God and worship God and acknowledge he was right? Think what that day will mean to God. And does that give you meaning and purpose? What is your purpose and my purpose in the world today? Whatever you and I are called to do for our job, our mission is to add voices to the choir. That's why I fly around the world. It's why I'm a pastor. That's why I do. You can be a teacher, doctor, nurse, parent, mother, raising your kids for God. Every time someone believes the truth about God, they now add their voice to the choir. That's why we do what we do. And someday God will honor us and say thank you for adding to the choir. God bless you.